Hello, everyone. Welcome to this webinar series on remote negotiation organized by the Center of Competence on Humanitarian Negotiation. My name is Hanalia Ferhan, and I will be your host today. Now, before introducing our participants, I wanted to just give you a quick note on the topic of this very first episode on remote negotiation, which is again, building rapport at a distance. And so just to make sure that we're all on the same page and to frame this discussion a little bit, rapport, we can define rapport as a combination of a close relationship between two counterparts that enable them to understand each other's ideas, understand each other's feelings very well, and therefore rapport relies and includes very good communication between these two counterparts. So if we accept this as our working definition for today's discussion, we can imagine that building rapport is in a sense creating a space between you and your counterpart where you can exchange information to enable your counterpart to decide and assess whether you are trustworthy, and also to enable you, of course, to decide whether your counterpart is trustworthy in the negotiation. So of course, building rapport is a very important element in the transactional stage of humanitarian negotiation, and it contributes very clearly to trust building between the two counterparts. Having said that, I will say that there is no silver bullet to building rapport, and we will most likely see this in our discussion with our two panelists and with you all and your comments and the shared experiences. There is no silver bullet. What we're going to discuss today may work in one specific context and at one specific time, but not at others. The purpose of this discussion is really to raise our awareness and increase our shared understanding of the different considerations that we should keep in mind when we are trying to build rapport with our counterparts using remote communication channels, when we cannot sit with them at a physical negotiation table. And so without further ado, and in order to discuss these specific points, I will introduce our two panelists for today, which I'm extremely pleased to have with us. The first one is Mrs. Suna Aweidah, who is Access Liaison Officer with the UN Access Unit based in Jerusalem. And Suna will be sharing with us her very interesting, very strong experience of building rapport with counterparts at a distance without meeting them or without having the possibility to interact with them face to face. And following Suna's experience sharing, we will have an intervention by Mr. Kirk, who is Director of Negotiated Resolutions and a professional negotiator with the ADN group. And Kirk will be sharing with us his commentary on Suna's experience, his analysis, and there will be a bit of an exchange between the two of them before we will, as I mentioned earlier, open the floor to all participants for questions, comments, your own reflections, and your own experience sharing. So without further ado, I thank you all for being with us. And Suna, I invite you to unmute yourself and share your experience of building rapport at a distance with us. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Hanalia, for this opportunity. And I hope that all are good and in a good health. Actually, I will introduce myself in a quick way. My name is Suna. I'm working with the Access Coordination Unit as an Access and Liaison Officer for around 10 years. And I'm based in Jerusalem and work in Jerusalem. So our unit's mandate is to facilitate and coordinate, negotiate the access for the humanitarian workers and goods within the country. So we negotiate with different interlocutors. So actually my character, I give you a little bit about my character. I'm an optimistic person. I'm always optimistic. I like to smile all the time. To build like a good relationship, and I believe in my goal. I like my work. I love my work because I like to help people. Actually, always I put my goals, and I think that I will get there. I always optimistic. I think that if you have the humanitarian feeling, you will be a successful humanitarian worker, and you will succeed in your negotiation. About negotiation, actually, I think that relation is before negotiation. This what I feel, that we need to build a relationship with our counterpart before we start to negotiate with them. And if it will be like kind of friendly and professional relationship, it will help a lot. Actually, this is my way in negotiating any access issue. My unit, we always negotiate the access with different authorities, actually. So how I build a relationship with my counterpart, we have a different counterpart. Before the pandemic, before the COVID-19, when I have like a new counterpart, what I do, I call them by phone, introduce myself briefly, explain about my unit, who I am, what I do, how I work, and then I arrange a meeting to go and meet with them face to face. When I go to meet with them, of course, we exchange like a business card. We speak about life in general. We speak about how is the situation in general. And I introduce myself and my unit, what we work, what we used to work with with my counterpart, previous officials. And then I speak in general about the access issues in the area. So I say that this is the access issues, we might face this problem or that problem. So I give them an idea what we might face in the future. Then I do like in the first meeting, I don't explain about like I need to negotiate this and this. I do it like introduction meeting in the beginning. Then I do like many phone calls. I keep in touch with them, do regular meetings with them, have a coffee even without negotiation. Then whenever I have any access issue, I call them. I tell them, hi, how are you? Do you remember that what we spoke about in our meeting? It's happening now. So I need your help. So if you can help me in this, it will be easier this way. And whenever the issue is solved, I call them again to appreciate their help. To tell them, okay, thank you for this. Thank you. It was solved. All good. So I appreciate your help. It makes like a difference. And I keep in touch with them, like I greet them in their holidays, I call them to ask about them and all of these issues. Actually, when the pandemic started, it was like I feel that I find myself in a different world. I remember my first meeting, it was on WebEx. And it was optional, so you can come to the office or you do it from home. So I don't know how to connect actually. So I said no, I will go earlier to the office to know how to connect on WebEx. So I went to the office. I asked one of my IT staff or colleagues to help me. He helped me. We did a test. And it was actually easier than what I thought. So only you press join meeting and you find yourself like how we are now in this meeting. So then I started doing this from home. Actually, when we started working at home, what I did, I prepared an area with a good internet connection. A quiet area, like comfortable for me to work without any disturb. And I started thinking how I will connect my counterparts. Actually, I started calling them, my previous counterparts, that asking about them, asking about the situation in general, asking about the pandemic in their area, if they are infected persons, if they are working from home, if they are working from office, all of these issues. So I think that with this, I kept my professional and friendly relationship with them. Then if we have any problem, I was calling them and asking for their help. But actually, what I remember that when the pandemic started, I have a new official working with an authority that I didn't meet before. So I was thinking how I will build this relationship with him. So first I started calling him. I called him, introduced myself. This is Suna, working with this unit, our unit mandate, all of this. So I explained to him. And I tried to do it like an introduction without any negotiations. And then I started explaining about work, about life in general. I did many phone calls with him before I start negotiating. Just ask about food, about sweets, what is the best place to do this kind of dish, what is the best place to do this sweet. Then I was asking about his family, about the pandemic, how they work, all of these issues. And then I started negotiating. I use WhatsApp a lot, by the way. The WhatsApp is good, like to tell him that this is what we have, what do you think? I was using like the phone calls, WhatsApp, emails. And then after all of this, I arranged for a meeting via Zoom. So I prepared all of the negotiation objectives that we want to achieve. Then I prepared like all the options, and we arrange a meeting. We speak, we see each other. So actually in the beginning, I told him even about his previous colleagues that I used to deal with this, with that. So he feel like more comfortable dealing with a person that used to deal with the previous colleagues. Then we started negotiating. I started follow up the negotiation that I sent by email, on phone, on WhatsApp, all of these issues. Actually, with other authorities, I remember that actually I have also an official that I didn't meet before. So what I did the same phone call, introduce myself, my work, my unit, all of this. Then I asked about his title and his job. He sent me by WhatsApp his business card. I sent him by WhatsApp my business card and my UNID. So in this, we feel that we communicate with each other without even seeing each other. Then we started like dealing with each other by phone, by WhatsApp, via Zoom, and all of these issues. And actually, this is the other official. Actually, I was not dealing with his previous colleague. So I start calling my interlocutors working in the same authority, asking who's dealing with this. Do you know who's the focal point for that? And they gave me his number. When I talked to him and I told him that I got your number from this official, he was like relaxed. And he was okay to deal with me. So I built a little bit of trust with him. Actually, I told him the same, that about the access issues that we might face. We were facing like because of the COVID-19, we were facing there was like more access restrictions. So I asked him if we can like deal with whom can we deal with this. So he told me you can talk to me directly. I was talking to him, and when I told him that okay, this was happening, and he was very helpful actually, and it worked very well with me. Actually, even before the pandemic, I was using the phone call, WhatsApp a lot. But what is new for myself is the Zoom, WebEx, Teams. These meetings, and I feel that we have like a positive thing from these like Zoom, WebEx, all of this, because you know you save time. Sometimes if you need to do like a meeting, you need to drive to there and to come back. So you save time. You can do it whenever and anytime. And you can have like more than one person in one like what we have now. You can have from all of the locations. So I find that it has like a positive issue. But I still use a WhatsApp a lot. I use the WhatsApp very much. But what I feel that when you go and meet in person, I use my body language a lot, you know. So I go, when you have coffee, you have biscuits, talk to your interlocutor, and you use your body language. It gives like, I don't know, I feel that I can express myself more with my face, with my hands, with my expressions. But actually, when I do the phone call or WhatsApp, when I do the phone call, I play with my tone, or I say says, oh really? Oh, I'm happy to do this. I'm happy to have that. All of these issues. But when I use the WhatsApp, I use the emojis. So I felt like I use the like a lot, a happy face, or wondering what's happening. So and I feel that my interlocutors like it as well. So instead of body language, they can feel that you're happy or sad or wondering or all of these issues. And actually, they started using the same, by the way. So I feel that it's good to build a very good and friend relationship with your counterpart to do like these issues. Actually, I think that even after the COVID-19, we will think to use these WebEx or the Zoom meetings because maybe it's easier. We save time and effort. Actually, this is what I see. And I will still use the WhatsApp. Before the pandemic, I was using the WhatsApp, and after the pandemic, I am using the WhatsApp. Actually, yeah, this is what I feel, and I hope that you like my experience, my way in negotiating, in building a relationship with my counterpart, and I would like to listen to the comments.
Thank you very much, Suna, for sharing this experience with us, a very rich experience. I'm encouraging everybody to react to Suna's experience and storytelling in the chat. Ask your questions about her practice, her context, or share your own practice so that we can exchange later on. Suna, I think as a transition towards Kirk's comment on your experience sharing, I'll say one thing that I'm very impressed with is, and of course, you seem to be a very social and extroverted person. I know you're a very social and extroverted person.
Thank you.
It probably comes naturally to you. But one thing you said it was easier than what I thought. And I think that's something that really I would like to stress, because I feel when the pandemic hit us, we were all taken aback and shocked, by the fact that now we can't negotiate in person anymore. And our immediate reaction was probably, well, we can't do it, or it's too difficult. And maybe it is in fact easier than what we thought. So I'm curious to hear what Kirk has to say about this and about Suna's practice and the examples that she gave us. Kirk, the floor is yours.
A good introduction there. And Suna, thank you for your presentation. That was wonderful just to be watching how expressive you were, and yeah, you spoke about your mindset, but your mindset was clearly very positive. So yes, my background is that I previously was in law enforcement and was a hostage negotiator for 20 years. And I eventually became the head of hostage negotiation in Scotland. And when I completed my service, I moved into the business world, and so I now teach negotiation. And I have been doing that for the last 3 years, although I taught negotiation in law enforcement for over 15 years. So that's the purpose of me being here this morning. And I have been involved in many UK nationals kidnapped abroad. And so I have some experience of the type of thing that Suna is speaking about there, about negotiating access, although your own experience is unique. So my guidelines and where I'm coming from will be general, and it should always be bespoke to you. And so I wrote down some notes from what Suna was talking about there so that I could address them as I go through. And I've just realised I've taken 2 pages of notes that she spoke about so many good things there. So thank you, Suna, that was excellent. I suppose really I'll start off by talking about technology. So technology for me is really no different as it is from you, and clearly the fact that you are part of this Zoom meeting means that you have conquered your fears over technology. But conquering fear is the biggest issue, and recognizing that fear is just one of the emotions. You know, you've got fear, anger, surprise, disgust, happy, along with trust and anticipation, two things which are feelings that we have. And once you recognize that you feel that, once you confront that, you can start to minimize that and deal with that and confront it. So well done to you, Suna, for overcoming your fear of technology and just minimizing that and getting into it, and likewise with the rest of us that have conquered that. So the first thing which was very obvious was your optimistic mindset and your expressive body language, which is something which you have conveyed your energy over the camera this morning, and I suppose we can reflect at the end what impact that had on the other participants. But of the mindsets to be in, there's combative, compassionate, competitive, confirmatory, passive, and autobiographic. And compassionate, is the most relevant one is the most successful. And as humanitarian workers, I would imagine you all have compassion for the plight of others in abundance. So your belief in what you're doing means that you're starting at an advantage. You don't start with a negative mindset. You naturally will have concerns about speaking to new people, but you'll do the same as you did with technology. Recognize it, accept it as a fear, and conquer that fear. I also like that you mentioned, Suna, relationship before negotiation. We must establish rapport, and whilst we establish rapport, create that environment, that helps to build a relationship. And I'll talk about later on that building a relationship is something different from building trust. That comes later on. You mentioned your goal is access issues. So it's good to form the relationship before you focus on your objective. Because if you concentrate on the relationship during negotiations, you will become weakened. We speak about being able to display empathy. So empathy is really about the ability to recognize and verbalize emotions, things that you see, so that you can connect with someone. Sympathy is sharing their feelings, and the minute you start to share their feelings, okay, it makes you a more compassionate person in the relationship phase. But when you're negotiating, you will sacrifice your objective for the relationship. So it's good to recognize that it's important at the start to be sympathetic and caring, but once you commence negotiations, you should focus on your goal and objective. You also mentioned your first meeting, maybe an introduction and exchange numbers in WhatsApp, and maybe have a meeting, and you move from WhatsApp onto Zoom. And that's also the perfect technique, because for me, the purpose of your first meeting is to achieve a second meeting, no more. And it's good not to try and express your goals and objectives too early, not to be deceitful, but to recognize there is a place for that. So for me, one of the things that we teach people is in terms of first impressions. You've heard the phrase, you never get a second chance to create a first impression. So it's important that you think about that first impression. Your first few lines, you should rehearse it in advance, think about your appearance, but more importantly, how will it be perceived and received by the other person? Because their perspective is more important than yours. And you'll also recognize that as negotiations, in terms of first impressions, negotiators' number one tool, despite the technology, is your voice. So think about your voice. Think about slowing down the way I'm doing right now. Reduce your voice by an octave. If you have a high-pitched voice and you speak very quickly, be conscious how that sounds to the other person. So just think about your pitch, your pace, and your tone, and speak in a way that you think other people will want to listen to you. You know, and one of the things we talk about is put on your nighttime DJ voice. You know, that hypnotic, slow, relaxing voice. And also be able to recognize the voice of the people that you speak to. Voice recognition is something which is very important in human beings, and you'll recognize that yourself when you perhaps call someone on the phone and they know who you are by the tone of your voice. It's important to pay attention to other people. You also mentioned Suna, you know, when you're chatting to people, you said things like, do you remember me? I spoke to him in the past and I've got similar connections. And that's a really good tactic to reinforce shared experiences. Have as many connections as you can find with people. You know that when we deal with people who are kidnapped abroad, we try and find as many connections with the group as we can. We will have maybe some hostage negotiators back in the UK. We have some in the country. We will have diplomatic channels. We have people speaking through locals and the clans and the tribes. As many connections as we can. So don't just think you are the only voice. You also said, thank you for your help when asking for something. All human beings have 5 core concerns: appreciation, autonomy, affiliation, status, and role. 5 things which are inherent to us all. So if you show appreciation for other people, you will connect with them on a level which helps solidify when it comes to trust later on. And you actually mentioned that you asked the person, how do I connect with your counterparts? That shows that you're considering the perspective of other people. Again, most important. I often quote a Scottish poet, and I'll do that for you this morning, Robbie Burns, who wrote more poems than William Shakespeare and more plays, but he's less famous. That's probably why Scottish people are angry. But Robert Burns gave a quote that said, "Oh, wad some power the gift to gie us to see ourselves as others see us." Now, to translate, that means, oh, how powerful would it be if we could see ourselves the way that other people see us? And that's not the same as looking in a mirror and seeing yourself, but it's consider the mindset of the other person. How will they see you? And how will they understand and receive your words? And it's good that you did that, Suna, so that's excellent. You know, I'm going back to moving from WhatsApp to Zoom. One of the things that you should try and include in your dialogue is the recognition of emotion. You know, we mentioned emotions earlier on, and if you are only in WhatsApp, you have to find the appropriate method of sending emojis, because emojis may not always be appropriate. But you have to find a way. That's a really good way of conveying and sharing emotion. So you have to think of the best and appropriate emoji for the situation, but also how that will be received by that. And Suna, you mentioned in your words, I felt that they liked it as well. So you have considered how that will be received by them. So once we have established rapport and we start to build the relationship, we then move to the subsequent meetings, and we would always establish this way before we start to negotiate. And it's about building trust. And you mentioned, you know, the relationship is different from the negotiation, and the relationship is different from trust. How do you build trust? Well, trust is an emotion, if you like. It's a feeling. And people want to trust you. And the reason that people want to trust you is they believe in a feeling of certainty. People want to have that feeling that something is certain and that you're reliable. And that feeling of certainty comes from, you know, shared experiences, repetitive and continuous consistency. All of these things are important to build trust. You can have 100 meetings with someone, but if you change your opinion lots of times, or if you're inflexible, then that will hinder your trust. But it's important to recognize what that is, and trust is made up of both trust, truth, and transparency. And if you are not transparent, people will perceive at the other end of the spectrum that you're telling lies. And if you're not telling the truth all of the time, or they are not convinced by your body language or your expression, they will also perceive perhaps lies or a fraudulent intent. And if they don't trust you, they will be suspicious of you. So it's important that we understand truth, transparency, and trust are at the core of what you want to do once you move into that second meeting. So it's important to not only express your goals and objectives, but to express why they're important to you, and to ask your counterpart, help me understand what's important to you, because you will not be able to influence people if you do not get buy-in from them. They have to buy into your project. They have to understand why something's important to you, but also what's in it for them. You have to search for that common shared objective once we start negotiation. We have to articulate something which you have in common, and that would be the lowest common denominator. And you can see that Suna was searching for that when she was engaged. And if it's even to negotiate access, the common denominator they would both have is the safety of the occupants of perhaps a campsite or a besieged part of a city, that even the military or the militias from that city do not wish to harm innocent people. So the common shared objective would be to minimize harm to innocents. And if that's your starting point for your dialogue or negotiation, once you have established rapport, once you have established a relationship, once you have built trust, then you can try and understand your counterpart and be able to influence them to achieve your goal. And that's a kind of process that I think that Suna has gone through, and I hope that Hanalia was hoping to get out of this morning, that you'll at least consider a process which is repetitive, but through expression of your body language, you will convey as authentic. We don't want you rehearsed to the point where people believe that you're just playing a game, because, you know, especially in your world, it's much more than a game. Hanalia, is that roughly what you were expecting, Suna? I hope that was okay for a description of your process.
This is very, very interesting. Well, I, for one, find it extremely interesting. Thanks a lot, Kirk, for being able to just rack your brains around Suna's experience sharing and her storytelling. And we have quite a few questions, and we've had quite a few reactions in the chat. So I'll move on to this now and direct them towards either of you, but I also invite colleagues, participants who are in the meeting right now, share your experiences. If you're working from different contexts, and I see people here from South Sudan, I see people here from many different countries. Please do share your experiences. Tell us what has worked in your context that hasn't worked, or that wouldn't work in Suna's maybe, or vice versa. What Suna's expressed maybe wouldn't work in your context. Kirk, there's one very important first question for you. A couple of people have asked us if you could write the poem you quoted in the chat. And once you do this, I'll take the opportunity to direct our first question to Suna.
I'll do that. Robert Burns to allow, so I'll do it right now.
Thank you. So, Suna, this is a question from me, but also from colleague Fiorella, who inputted it in the chat. You know, when we negotiate at a distance, it's always, I find it easier to get angry or to misunderstand what your counterpart is saying, you know, by text or just by voice, because you get less information, you have less body language to interpret what your counterpart is saying. So how are you maintaining this positive attitude of yours? How are you able to just consistently keep this positive, optimistic attitudes, even when your counterpart may not be very friendly, or when you may not perceive them as very friendly or available for you to discuss about sweets in Israel and Palestine and all of that?
Yeah. Actually, I think about my counterpart. I first thank you, Kirk, for your comments. Thank you very much. So about the counterpart, I think that I need to choose the correct counterpart. When I say that this is the correct one that I will negotiate with, if he doesn't feel like I need to be like ready to move like to more like to be more serious, or يعني how I will tell you, if I will communicate with my counterpart and I feel that he is not happy to what I'm saying, let's say, so maybe I will ask him, is it the right time to speak with you about this? Do you have the time to negotiate about this? So I give him an idea what we will talk about. And if I think that he's not willing to negotiate at this time, maybe I choose another time, or in the next time I'll bring like another stuff with me. You know, I don't go negotiate by myself. Maybe I'll bring another stuff with me, or I will go back, think about, is he the correct counterpart that I need to negotiate with? I don't know if I answered your question. I can't hear you.
Absolutely, yes, thank you. Kirk, yeah. I don't know if you would like to comment on this. Do you have anything to add to this?
No, sorry, I was typing there. Sorry. What was the question?
The question was for Suna, how she has been able to maintain her positive attitude consistently throughout negotiation, even when, you know, remotely you may find it difficult to, or you may misinterpret what your counterpart is feeling for anger or for any sort of negative feelings. Any practical tips on your side?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. For me, one of the things which I have developed for me and dealing with many challenging situations is to get myself to have unshakable self-belief. Get to the point where my self-belief cannot be shaken. And that's different from high self-confidence and ego, but self-belief for me should be really good for humanitarian workers because it's believing in something that you do. And there are two types of people who are internally referenced and people who are externally referenced. And a lot of young people are externally referenced. You know, it's important what they look like, if they have a blemish on their skin, that they have a nice car, that they have, you know, it's important that they are judged by other people. As you get older, you get a bit of wisdom and you can be internally referenced. And when you're internally referenced, you become your own critic. And if you believe in what you do, you understand, you're a good person with a good goal, then you are likely to doubt yourself a lot less because you recognize there will be bumps along the road. So that unshakable self-belief comes from within, knowing that you're doing a good thing, your intentions are good, and therefore it is less likely to fluctuate. And so even some days when you wake up and you maybe have a bad hair day or your voice is not good, it's not so important because your overall goal is much more important than the small things which can shake you.
Thanks, Kirk.
I may add something as well.
Go on. Suna, go on.
You know, always when you think to negotiate about something, always I put my goals and objectives, what I need to achieve from this. And I put like options, how I will solve this problem, either like A or B or C. And usually I ask my interlocutor, how you think we have this issue? How do you think that we will solve this problem? He might mention one of my options that I am planning to solve with, and it will be like giving him like the power, let's say, in saying like we'll solve it this way and this way. These are the options. If it works with me, then it's fine. I'll tell him, okay, as you said, as you mentioned, so we'll go for it like this. If it's not, then I'll start to negotiate about other options.
Yeah, thanks, Suna, for this addition to the discussion. And we've talked a lot about this, you know, the socializing element and the time you dedicate to socializing with your counterparts before actually getting to the negotiation. I'd like to depart a little bit from this for a minute, Kirk, because there's been a couple of questions in the chat, and that's also a question of interest to me that I'm hoping you can help us answer with your experience of hostage negotiation. I assume when you're in a situation of negotiating in a hostage situation, you have to establish a rapport with your counterpart, the hostage taker, pretty quickly. with remote communication channels like phones, for instance.
Yeah.
And any tips or any advice or analysis on how to, when you cannot dedicate long periods of times and multiple phone calls and spend days discussing, socializing, getting to know your counterparts, are you still able to establish rapport?
Yes, absolutely. So hostage negotiators, we invest considerable amount of time training them so that we recognize the process of how to build a relationship, how to build rapport, how to build trust. And so there is a process there. And it's so robust that we can condense that process into a short time scale. So what would typically happen is if you're speaking with someone on the edge of a bridge who's contemplating suicide, you have to build such a strong relationship with them in maybe 1 or 2 hours that will convince them that your view of the world is more trustworthy than their view of the world. You know, you have to understand, first of all, why they want to die so that you can convince them of a reason of why they should live. And it's the same with hostage takers. You know, you have to spend time listening with them to understand their view of the world. And if you can find a connection with their view of the world and you can understand them, then you can build some trust. So that would be perhaps numerous phone calls, repeatedly establishing a connection with them, remembering things which are important to them. And I'll go back to Robbie Burns again. Their perspective is more important. So the example would be if you're speaking to someone in an area of the world who have taken hostages, as an example. And you should look at the emotions which are being expressed. You should look at the motivations. So we listen for facts, emotions, values, beliefs, motivators, currency, and worth. We're listening for keywords which turn information into intelligence. And the keywords that someone may express or the emotion which might come out may be frustration or anger or hatred. Example, hatred for the West or hatred for the Americans or whatever that happens to be. And then you can say, well, actually, you don't have to agree with them, but you have to recognize where that emotion comes from and say something like, I hear the anger in your voice. I hear vengeance in you, that you wish to kill the people or harm the people that you have taken hostage. I too would feel that vengeance and anger and frustration had I seen my village being bombed and I needed someone to blame. But in actual fact, to then kill people means that you are the same as the people you hate, and that's the way you will be viewed by the world. So perhaps to offer them some, not so much moral high ground, but offer them an opportunity to see that your view of the world, but recognizing their view of the world is compelling. So when people see that you connect with them, that you understand, and they feel heard and they feel understood, that's what we call an engrossed transformational conversation. You know, the moment when maybe even if you're meeting someone in a social circle and you say, he just understands me or she just understands me or they get me. That's an engrossed moment in conversation when that person feels heard and feels understood. So we teach people to listen for the moments that help you connect with someone more than on a superficial language and more than just recognizing the facts of the situation. We have to listen for the emotions, the values, beliefs, the drivers, the motivators, and the currency, things which are important to them. So really it's about listening. It's about listening to them and trying to understand their view of the world. I don't know if that helps or makes it more confusing.
No, thank you, Kirk. I mean, I was going to ask you, how do you learn this? How do you train this? And Suna also, maybe because you seem to have this, you know, naturally. I'm wondering if this is something you work on, you train yourself. Have others in the meeting been able to train this, or have been able to recognize that maybe they need to reinforce the skills? And if so, how do you work on this?
Yeah, so listen, that's something that, you know, it's my raison d'etre now. It's something that I spend my life teaching other people so that they can improve their relationships in many contexts, in many scenarios, you know, from the basis of saving the lives of hostages, from suicide intervention, all the way to getting your child to stop doing bad things and start doing good things. You know, if you, a simple example that I give is my son, when he was a young man, was making some food in the kitchen and being rude and not doing his homework. And when I spoke to him, I said, you know, son, it's time to do your homework. And he turned around very aggressively and pushed past me and pushed me out of the way. And my instincts were to chastise him. But I heard his voice. I recognized that as a teenage boy, he was searching for autonomy. And I said to him, okay, son, when would you like to do your homework? Now or later on this evening? And he said, I'll do it later on this evening, Dad. And I gave him the illusion of choice. You know, he had just had to feel heard. And so it's something which is adaptable to every scenario. And so you can practice it at home, practice it with your friends and family. And the more you practice, the more you learn of this stuff, then that would be your default position, because your highest level of training is your lowest level of behavior when in crisis. Because we all know when these things happen, you may end up having your own personal crisis, because there will be more things going on than just your conversation. So if you can repeatedly perform this under pressure, that's what makes it consistent. So yeah, we teach people to, you know, we invest a lot of time, and the more you train, the more you learn of this stuff, the more of a default position it will be. And clearly Suna has it naturally, but she has been trained and rehearsed it over and over again to the point where she doesn't even think about it anymore.
Thanks, Kirk. And so before I actually have there's a question, a practical question for you, Suna, in there. So I wanted to direct this towards you before moving to a couple of other topics in the chat that are quite interesting. The question for you, Suna, is have you encountered any moments or any interaction where you felt it was very difficult to push the conversation forward with an interlocutor? And how did you resolve this difficult situation remotely without meeting your counterparts in person?
Actually, it is happening sometimes, even if it's not remotely. If you go and you meet your counterpart in person, sometimes you feel that you're not going anywhere at this specific point. So what I do, I stop negotiation at this point. I go back and I start speaking about other issues, and I go back, discuss it with my office. So this is what we have here. We're stuck at this point. Maybe we take it to a higher level from my office, from my counterpart office, and they will negotiate it on a higher level. So, but when I find myself that I'm blocked, so I go back and I don't continue negotiating anymore, actually. If I feel that maybe it's not the best time for that, maybe I'm not prepared well about options, so I go back, discuss it, and it will be discussed maybe on a higher level.
Thanks, Suna. And I'll point out in the chat, we have the team is also using WhatsApp a lot to keep the rapport alive and strengthen the rapport with their counterparts during work, but also outside of work for religious celebrations or any sort of other events, which goes back to the point you were making during your storytelling about how WhatsApp has been a great tool for you to maintain the rapport with the counterparts. And in fact, one other element that you mentioned is the use of references or referrals. Sometimes you say, when I have to get introduced to, or when I have to start a relationship with a new counterpart, it helped me to tell them, well, I'm calling from so-and-so, or I got your contact from this person that we know. And we have a question there on, well, could you and Kirk as well make any recommendations on how to use references as a leverage to build rapport with your counterparts? Suna?
Yes. Actually, when I have a new counterpart, I use references actually to tell them that I was dealing with your authority, with this specific official, just to make them feel that I have the relation before, we were dealing this way, we were dealing with your like colleagues. I feel that this makes my counterpart, or if specifically if he's new, like feel okay, she's dealing with us, she knows us, so we were dealing with her. Actually this helps. This I feel that it helps a lot when you use the references, and specifically if it's a new counterpart that you're dealing with.
Sorry, Kirk, do you have anything to add on this topic?
Yes, so I've written that down as one of the comments that Suna mentioned earlier when she mentioned in her description multiple interlocutors. And for me, that's multiple connections, because it's far better that in your relationship, you have a network of connections rather than just the one that's very strong, you know, almost like a family of connections, because you know someone who knows someone else on their side. And it's, if you think about that perception of, you know, your family relationships, sometimes it's compelling to do something or to help someone just because your cousin may know their brother, you know, so it's good to have many connections and to make use of them.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay, so I think there's an agreement that the power of references can be leveraged really to boost the rapport that we're building with our counterparts. I see.
Hanalia, especially if the counterpart that you will use as a reference is a higher level than the counterpart that you'll deal with. I have an experience that I have like a counterpart that I was dealing with. He referred me to another one that I will continue dealing with him like for like access issues. So when I mentioned that I was dealing with this higher level and he referred me to you, so it makes it easier to deal with.
Okay, and so I wanted to also go back maybe a little bit towards the topic of, you know, how do you establish this rapport very quickly, because we have also had a couple of comments and questions in the chat related to, well, sometimes you have to negotiate without trust because the topic is, well, it has to be resolved very quick, or also because you know that there cannot be trust, or it's going to be extremely difficult to build this with your counterparts, just because what are the shared values? You know, what can be the shared values with warlords or with criminals, or and so how to mitigate this, how to go around this, in particular when you cannot sit face to face, when you cannot meet your counterparts face to face.
Is this for me?
Please go ahead.
Okay. Actually, usually if I have like something comes that I need to negotiate like directly without building a relationship, I do a phone call, explain, as I mentioned, about myself, about my unit, what we work, and I would say thank you for answering my phone call, thank you for giving me your time, all of this in my phone call. Then I will mention that I hope that we have the time to meet with each other, and I hope in the future where maybe we can meet to discuss these issues. But now we have a specific issue that I need to mention to you about. So maybe this I do it this way. So I do it like sometimes if I need to do it like in a short time, so I can do it like this way. Say that I hope that we can meet in the future. We'll to discuss it better than this, but now we have a short time and we need to discuss it now.
Thanks. Kirk, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. So I have two techniques where you really have to deal with an issue head on. The first one is, if I don't have trust relationship with that person, do I know someone that he or she has trust with? And can I hijack that relationship? You know, so the example I would have with you just now is that, Hanalia, perhaps you don't trust me, but you trust Suna, who trusts me. Maybe you can speak to Suna and understand that I've never let her down before. So you see that I am presenting my relationship with Suna to you because you have a relationship with Suna and not one with me. So I'll hijack someone else's trust. But the second thing that I'll also do is when I'm engaging them in conversation, I will listen for value. And the value proposition is about understanding what's important to them. What's in it for me? You know, that Robert Burns mindset, what's in it for me? And there are 4 elements to value. So one will be the financial cost. Is money important to them? 2, usefulness. How useful can I be for them? How useful is it for them to do a thing for me? Socially and psychologically, how will this make them look? How will it make them feel? So I will weave a story through these 4 elements and then give it to them so that I'll recognize that this is what's in it for you, because we don't have time to build a relationship, we don't have time to build trust, but I can hear in the key words and phrases what's important to them. So if I can deliver something which is important to them, or at least looks like it might be in the future important to them, I can encourage them to take a chance on me.
We had an interesting question in there who shared that he once faced a situation where a conspiracy-obsessed militant, his word, not mine, interrupted a food distribution. Suna or Kirk, I don't know if you would like to react to this intervention.
A good point. So yeah, it goes back to what I was saying about empathy. It's about being able to recognize and articulate what you see coming from them. Your perspective is not so important. So even if you have a bunch of facts about why they should trust you from your mind, it doesn't connect with their mind. So just recognizing, one, that their feelings are there, but we must always ask ourselves, if a person is saying something, do they really believe it? Okay, so if a person's saying, you know, having dealt with lots of paranoid, schizophrenic people on the edge of a bridge in Scotland, we have to make sure that we don't enter into their world, but we tell them that we recognize they can see things. So quite often I'll have someone saying, I can see a spaceship in Martians. Well, it's important for us not to say, I can see it too, but you have to say, wow, that must be frightening for you to experience that. And that way you can connect with someone, acknowledge their feelings, and also assess that if they believe it to be true, because you should never dismiss something that they believe to be a firmly held belief. Why would you do that? You're just going to put a barrier between you and them. So it's about being patient, and as he says, don't react. You should be proactive with these things and try to be understanding of their perspective, even if it sounds ridiculous to you.
I actually like this idea, you know, because we're talking about, yes, building rapport, socializing, you know, we're not talking about making friends, but we're talking about socializing, yet it remains a job, no? There's responsibility, there's a lot at stake. And so we don't want to forget to call once. And I really like this idea of making, you know, having a sort of accountability system where you can track, where you can make sure that you tick the box, that you maintain the rapport. And it's not like if you forget to call your mother one Saturday, you know, it's not, the stake may not be the same, and the counterpart may not be as forgiving. So thanks for sharing this. Kirk, I saw you nodding. Is it a nod of agreement?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a nod of agreement, and also recognition of how much hard work you have to do in peacetime so that you can use that, you know, in crisis. So in terms of crisis, it's almost too late to do that hard work. So do that preparation work right now, and you know, build diagrams, recognize people who has influence over who in whichever organization, and that's very professional, very complex and hard work, but necessary in critical situations. So thank you for that, because for me, that's a lot of work which goes on behind the scenes and is often unrecognized, and also to recognize that must cause frustration in you to continually do that, but also a recognition that it's necessary if you want to achieve your goal.
Thanks, Kirk. And go ahead.
Hanalia, yes. Actually, we do it in our unit the same, because we keep the contact person's list. because sometimes in our area, if we have like a liaison officer in this area, he might be moving, disappear for a time, then we'll come to another area. So when we call him and again, we tell him, do you remember when you were there? So it's easier for us to continue working with him or negotiating with him. So it's really a good idea, and we do it in our unit as well. And we always update our contact list.
Question was very, very relevant to your context because you work in a context where sensitivities are very high, where you know, negotiations are very politicized, and where the wrong word by the wrong person at the wrong time may have drastic unintended consequences. And so I'm thinking, how do you mitigate this? How have you been able to correct this?
Actually, this didn't happen actually with me, but sometimes it happens in a different way. Like you say, you feel that your interlocutor is not happy, let's say, talking about this specific person or about this specific issue, or let's say that your interlocutor is not happy from your organization. Let's say it might happen. So if this is happening, I would like to calm him down, to say, okay, what's happening? Maybe you misunderstood. So I will explain more about our work, and maybe I will bring like people that he trusts, that to be in the meeting, let's say. So if this is happening, if he's not happy, let's say, about not happy about our work, so I try to be a good listener, to listen to him, get all of the message that he would like to send us, and I will try to explain in a nice way what is our work, what is our mandate, what we are going to what we were going to, you know.
So I have attended a few of the online conferences, and I've heard a lot of people speaking about humanitarian principles, which are something which is critical to all of the organizations, and I understand that. But I have a technique for dealing with the baggage which comes with that, because you'll probably recognize, having spent some time in law enforcement, on most occasions when I commence negotiation, even moderate people hate law enforcement. So I start off in a default position that people will have a bad impression of me. So the technique that we use is to recognize that, let's deal with the elephant in the room. Okay, and so in English, I would have maybe 4 or 5 phrases prepared to recognize how they feel about me and my organization, because it's really about trust, and you have to be able to separate you from your organization, but also connect the two. So I would say something like, it seems to me that your previous experiences have left you disappointed, or it seems to me that your experience means that you don't believe I'll be flexible the way other people have been inflexible in the past, or it sounds like you are frustrated. And what that does is it gives you an opportunity to connect with that person and their experience. Then you can say, you can bring in, actually, I recognize the weaknesses of my organization. It's not meant to be a perfect fit for everyone, but let's you and I work together to make this a perfect fit for you. So again, what I might do is hijack that trust. And if there's a break in trust with my organization, I will make that trust personal, first of all. So I'll separate organizational trust from personal trust. Because I can say to people, yeah, you can see the reputation that law enforcement has in the USA just now. It's terrible. Everyone thinks police officers are racist and abusive, but actually, I understand that and I recognize that, and that's horrible, but I'm not one of them. You know, so that would be your way of recognizing that person's feeling towards you because you represent your organization, but allows you to formulate let's start a relationship personally and not organizationally. Just separate the two without being disloyal to your company or your ideals or objectives.
Thanks, Kirk, for coming in and commenting on this. I think it's very interesting because as you were starting your intervention, typed in a comment from their experience in the chat that really matches with what you were describing. So it's very, very timely comment. I'll point out actually one thing though that was added at the end of this comment that I think is also quite interesting in because we're talking here about humanitarian negotiation, is the suggestion to also try to explain to your counterparts the peculiarities of humanitarian work in the humanitarian sector, because your counterparts may not be very well versed or familiar with this. No, military commanders, a young 15-year-old with a Kalashnikov at a checkpoint may not understand very well how the sector works, your interests, your objectives, etc. And so may not, as a result, understand the limitations of what you can and cannot do. No, often, if I retake this example of a 15-year-old at checkpoints, they will see you as an NGO with a dollar sign on your forehead, for instance. But by explaining the limitations of what you can and cannot do, you also manage expectations, and I think that's an important part of this process. And I am going to ask actually one last question that was asked a little earlier, but that I skipped because it was touching more upon the topic of mediation, really, rather than direct negotiation. But it's very relevant to the idea of remote interaction. It is any tips from you, Suna, but also from you, Kirk, on managing, mediating meetings between two different groups or two different sets of counterparts on Zoom or on Teams, WebEx, any of these sorts of remote video conferencing tools. How to use and leverage the opportunities that these remote communication channels give us to manage these interactions more efficiently. Kirk, I'm thinking maybe you have some tips on this.
Yeah, so absolutely. Bruno, thank you very much. That's a very important perspective, and I almost stopped listening to you paying attention to the samurai swords behind you. But yeah, so one of the things that I do in terms of negotiating business contracts is that I have two opposing sides. And what I do is, before I have a Zoom meeting with opposing sides, I have individual Zoom meetings with them to prepare the conduct of that meeting. So I will tell people, okay, so we are going to have conflicting views. And conflict is okay. Conflict is good, because conflict is when you express a difference of opinion. And when you express a difference of opinion, that helps us find common ground. So please don't hesitate to express a different perspective. But what's important is that when you do that, you should respect your opponent. So be very strong on your opinion, but don't attack anyone. Don't blame them. And so when you come to hear something about you, you will receive that information with respect. So you can hold your position, you can be very firm, and we call it being hard on the point and soft on the person. So you can be nice, you can be gentle, you can be respectful, but hold your position. And that way, when you're in mediation, when you have opposing parties or opposing views, you just give them oxygen so that they can feel heard. And because they will not listen to the perspective of others unless they actually feel heard, first of all. So when you spoke earlier, Hanalia, about the 15-year-old boy with the Kalashnikov, he won't care about your principles until he feels heard by you and you demonstrate an understanding of the situation that he's in. So that's a good way to look at it. Thank you.
Thanks, Kirk. Hard on the point, soft on the person. I think that would be a good note to end this meeting, and a good takeaway. I think, generally speaking, particularly relevant to remote negotiation, and remote interactions, where we have to pay particular attentions to our own emotions and feelings, but others as well, and our capacity to interpret them and describe them properly. So it's been a very, very rich discussion. In order to close it, I wanted to, encourage all of you to continue interacting on the topic of remote negotiation. For those of you in particular who have access to our community of practice by CCHN Connect, please comment, please share your experiences. This will feed the interaction and the exchange. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we envision this as being a webinar series, albeit short, but it will be a series. So there will be another episode upcoming on a topic most likely related to moving a little bit further than rapport building, looking at trust building and trust strengthening by remote communication channel. And so stay tuned for the announcement related to this particular second episode. But also please share with us your thoughts, your experiences, your reflections, or any specific challenge or topic that you would like us to see addressed in this webinar series, or in any other format that you may think is appropriate. I would like to give a big thank you to our two panelists today, Kirk and Suna. Thank you very much for sharing your experience and your thoughts and your reflections with us. Very interesting and very enlightening. And also I'm very pleased to have paired the two of you. I think you make a fantastic pair, and it'll be tricky for the next panelists of the next episode to top that, but we'll try. And also thank you to colleagues from CCHN who have made this event possible. Andreas, Fiorella, Lisa, Anna, and Sophia for monitoring the chat and helping us make this a very constructive, lively event. And thanks to all of you participants, in particular those I put on the spot for questions and comments. I look forward to engaging with you again and continuing this conversation. And I will see you soon, next month, hopefully for the second episode of the series. Thank you very much.